My mom always said I was her greatest pride and most trusted child. Not in a normal, healthy way, but in that suffocating, guilt-inducing way that makes you feel special and trapped at the same time. You are the only one I can rely on, she would say, usually while my siblings got to live their lives freely. Your brother and sister would not survive 2 weeks without me holding their hands. But you are strong. You understand what real responsibility means. And I believed her. God help me, I really did. For years, I carried her emotional and financial burdens like it was my job. I was the one who paid half her bills when she claimed her disability check was not enough. I was the one who canceled dates because she needed someone to drive her to appointments that somehow always ran long enough to ruin my evening plans. I was the one who skipped vacations because she suddenly had a crisis with her taxes, her dog, or her latest dramatic health scare that required immediate attention. The emergencies were always perfectly timed. Date night with Sarah? Mom's car would break down and she would be stranded somewhere. Weekend plans with friends. Suddenly, she would have chest pains and need someone to drive her to urgent care, where they would inevitably find nothing wrong after 4 hours of waiting. My siblings lived 3 states away and barely called. But me? I was the local son, the reliable one, the one who cared about family. At least, that is what she told everyone at church, at the grocery store, to anyone who would listen about her devoted boy, who never forgot where he came from. Looking back, the manipulation was masterful. She would build me up as the responsible one, then tear me down the moment I tried to set boundaries. I guess I know where I stand with you, she would say if I could not drop everything for her latest emergency. I thought you were different from your selfish siblings, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe blood does not mean anything anymore. The guilt was crushing. She had this way of making her voice sound so small and defeated, like I was personally responsible for every hardship in her life. So I would always give in, always apologize, always promise to do better. I lived in a small apartment 10 minutes from her house, close enough for emergencies, but far enough to maintain the illusion of independence. I worked a decent job in its support at a mid-sized company, making around $65,000 a year, which she constantly reminded me was more than most people in this town ever see. I had been dating Sarah for about 8 months, and she was getting frustrated with my mother's constant intrusions into our relationship. It is like she schedules her crises, Sarah would say after another ruined evening. Every time we make plans, suddenly she needs you for something that could have waited until tomorrow. But I defended my mom. She was alone, she was struggling, she needed me. That is what family did for each other, right? Life was not perfect, but it was mine. Or so I thought. The first crack in my reality came during what should have been a routine therapy session. I had been seeing Dr. Martinez for about 6 months, mostly dealing with work stress and what I now realize was chronic anxiety from being my mother's emotional support system. The sessions were helping, and I was finally starting to set small boundaries with my mom. I wanted to follow up on that concerning email you sent last week, Dr. Martinez said, pulling out a file with my name on it. The one where you described having violent thoughts toward coworkers. I stared at him blankly, feeling like I had just been told I had a terminal illness. I am sorry. What? The email. Do I die? You said you were having intrusive thoughts about harming people at work, and you were worried about losing control during meetings. He showed me a printout. It was quite detailed and disturbing. I was surprised you did not mention it in our last session, especially given how urgent it seemed. I read the email in complete confusion, my hands actually shaking as I held the paper. It was from my email address, signed with my full name, but I had absolutely no memory of sending it. The tone was cold, clinical, describing violent fantasies in disturbing detail that made my skin crawl. But it was not my voice. It was not my thoughts. It was not my writing style. Dr. Martinez, I swear to you, I did not send this email. He looked genuinely concerned now, leaning forward in his chair. Are you experiencing memory issues? Blackouts? This kind of dissociation can be serious. The level of detail in this message suggests you were in a very dark place when you wrote it. I left that session feeling like I was losing my mind. Had I sent it and forgotten? Was I having some kind of breakdown? Was the stress finally getting to me in ways I did not understand? But it got worse. Much worse. 2 days later, Sarah confronted me at dinner, her eyes red like she had been crying. Why did you tell me you thought I was using you for money? She asked, hurt evident in every word. What? I never said that. Sarah, I would never. She showed me her phone, and I felt my stomach drop. A text message from my number. I have been thinking about our relationship, and I believe you are only with me for financial stability. I make good money and you do not. It is becoming obvious that you see me as a provider, rather than a partner. Maybe we should reconsider this. The message was cold, analytical, completely unlike how I communicated with her. Sarah, I swear to God I did not send this. This does not even sound like me. Then who did? It came from your phone. Your number. I grabbed my phone and frantically checked my sent messages. Nothing. The text was not in my sent folder. It was like it had never existed on my end. That night, I could not sleep. 2 incidents in 1 week where people claimed I had contacted them with concerning messages I had no memory of sending. Either I was having a complete psychological breakdown, or something else was happening. Something much more sinister. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Something I had never done unless I was actually dying. And spent the entire day doing something I should have done years ago. I actually looked at my email settings. Really looked at them. Every tab, every option, every setting I had never bothered to explore. What I found made my blood run cold, and my hands start shaking uncontrollably. My email had dozens of forwarding rules I had never created. Elaborate, sophisticated rules that automatically moved certain types of responses to hidden folders. Rules that redirected replies containing words like concern, worried, therapist, mental health, help, crisis, or dangerous straight to my spam folder, where they would be automatically deleted after 30 days. Someone had not just hacked my account. They had turned it into a sophisticated filtering system designed to hide evidence of their impersonation. I opened the spam folder with shaking hands, and what I found there made me physically nauseous. There were over 200 messages I had never seen. Responses from Dr. Martinez, expressing deep concern about my deteriorating mental state. Worried replies from Sarah asking if I was okay and begging me to call her. Messages from my boss, questioning my fitness for work, after receiving what he described as deeply troubling communications about workplace violence. There were messages from friends I had not heard from in months, all responding to emails I had apparently sent describing paranoid thoughts, depression, and concerning behavioral changes. Some had even offered to help me find a psychiatrist or to come stay with them until I got back on my feet. I felt like I was drowning in evidence of someone else's life. Someone had been living as me, digitally speaking, for months, maybe longer. But who had access to my email? Who knew me well enough to write convincing messages in my voice? I traced the forwarding rules back to their source, using the timestamp data and IP geolocation tools I had learned about in my IT job. The rules were created from a login in my hometown, specifically from an IP address that made everything click into place with horrible clarity. My mother's house. My mother had access to my email account. Years ago, during what she called a family emergency involving my grandfather's medical records, she had convinced me to give her my login credentials so she could check something important while I was at work and could not access my email. I had changed the password afterward, or thought I had, but apparently not before she had set up these elaborate forwarding systems and God knows what other digital traps. I spent the next 4 hours reading through the intercepted messages, and what I discovered was beyond anything I could have imagined. This was not just casual snooping or even basic identity theft. My mother had not just been reading my emails, she had been actively responding to them, pretending to be me, living a parallel digital life as her own son. There were dozens of messages to my therapist, sent over the course of 6 months, describing violent urges I had never had. Each one was carefully crafted to sound like me, but painted a picture of someone spiraling into dangerous mental illness. Dr. Martinez, I have been having thoughts about hurting my coworkers. Yesterday, I imagined pushing someone down the stairs. I am scared of what I might do. The voices are getting louder. Sometimes I catch myself talking back to them during meetings. People are starting to notice. I think about Sarah being with other men, and it makes me want to break things. I punched a hole in my wall last night. None of this had happened. None of these thoughts had ever crossed my mind. There were responses to work emails where I claimed to be struggling with anger management issues and having difficulty concentrating due to intrusive violent thoughts. Messages to friends where I described feeling paranoid and unstable, convinced that people were talking about me behind my back. She was systematically destroying my reputation and mental health credibility, one carefully crafted email at a time. But the most chilling discovery was a folder of drafted messages in my account, emails she had written but not yet sent. They were getting progressively more extreme, building towards something that made my skin crawl. Dr. Martinez, I have been having serious thoughts about hurting myself and others. I do not think I am safe to be around people anymore. I need help before I do something terrible. To my employer, I am writing to inform you that I am experiencing a severe mental health crisis and should not be trusted with sensitive work responsibilities or access to company property. I may pose a danger to myself and others. Sarah, I think I might be dangerous. I have been having violent fantasies about you and other people. You should probably stay away from me for a while. I do not trust myself. She was building toward a crescendo of fake mental illness that would culminate in, what? Getting me committed? Destroying my career? Isolating me completely from everyone who cared about me? I sat in my apartment, staring at months of evidence that my own mother, the woman who claimed to love me more than life itself, had been systematically sabotaging my life while playing the role of supportive parent to my face. But I needed more proof. I needed to see how deep this rabbit hole went and what her ultimate goal was. So I did something that felt like a complete violation of trust, but was absolutely necessary for my survival. I waited until she invited me over for dinner the next evening, and when she stepped out to get groceries from the store down the street, I did something I had never done in my entire life. I searched through my mother's personal computer. What I found on my mother's computer was worse than anything Stephen King could have imagined. She had a folder on her desktop labeled Emergency Documentation with subfolders organized like a professional investigation. Inside were dozens of files with names like mental health concerns, EMI name, behavioral incidents timeline, medical intervention options, and legal documentation required. I opened the first file with trembling hands and immediately wanted to vomit. It was a detailed 47-page timeline of my supposed mental decline, complete with fake diary entries written in a perfect imitation of my handwriting, fabricated incident reports with specific dates and times, and even mock doctor's notes. She had clearly created herself using medical terminology she had researched online. The entries went back over 2.5 years. March 15th, 2021, called me at 2:47 a.m. crying, saying he was hearing voices at work telling him his co-workers were plotting against him. Seemed very confused and agitated. When I suggested he speak to someone, he became hostile and accused me of trying to have him locked up. April 2nd, 2021, found in his apartment talking to himself in the kitchen. When I asked who he was talking to, he became defensive and claimed he was practicing for a presentation. But there was no one else there, and he seemed genuinely confused about my question. May 18th, 2021, missed work again without calling in. When I went to check on him, he claimed his coworkers were plotting against him and that his boss was trying to set him up for failure. Clear signs of workplace paranoia. Seemed disheveled and had not showered in several days. None of these incidents had happened. I had never called her crying about voices. I had never missed work without calling in. I had never had a conversation about workplace paranoia. She had fabricated everything with the attention to detail of a professional fiction writer. But it got so much worse. There was a subfolder labeled Legal Documentation Research containing printouts of articles about involuntary psychiatric holds, guardianship laws for mentally incompetent adults, the process for having an adult child declared unfit to manage their own affairs, and even research into which local psychiatric facilities accepted court-ordered commitments. She had been planning to have me declared mentally incompetent and committed to a psychiatric institution. The most horrifying file was titled Supporting Evidence Portfolio and contained screenshots of every fake email she had sent pretending to be me, printed copies of the concerning messages she had crafted, forged handwriting samples where she had practiced imitating my signature, and even a 3-page handwritten letter she had forged in my writing expressing detailed suicidal thoughts and plans. At the bottom of the folder was a document that made my blood freeze solid. Power of attorney. Emergency mental health intervention with my name filled in as the mentally incompetent party, and her name as the designated guardian and financial conservator. She had already filled out most of the legal paperwork. She just needed a few more documented incidents and some official medical opinions to justify filing it with the court. There was even a subfolder called Financial Projections, where she had calculated my monthly salary, estimated my savings, and planned out how she would use my income to cover my care expenses while I was institutionalized. The math was disturbingly precise. She had figured out exactly how much money she would have access to once she gained legal control of my finances. I took photos of everything with my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. The scope of her deception was breathtaking and terrifying. She had spent over 2 years building a completely fictional narrative of my mental illness, complete with fake evidence, forged documents, and detailed legal groundwork. And I finally understood exactly why she was doing this. Control. Money. Permanent dependency. If I was declared mentally incompetent, she would have complete power of attorney over my finances, my living situation, my medical decisions, my entire life. My salary, my savings, my future earnings would all be under her control while I was locked away in a psychiatric facility, branded as dangerous and unstable, with no legal recourse to challenge her authority. The woman who claimed to love me more than anything in the world had been systematically destroying my life to ensure I would never be able to escape her control. I copied everything to multiple flash drives, took additional photos as backup, put her laptop back exactly where I had found it, and left her house for what I knew would be the last time as her unsuspecting victim. It was time to end this nightmare. Permanently. I spent the next week and a half preparing for what I knew would be the most important battle of my life. I was not just organizing evidence. I was building a case that would completely destroy the carefully constructed image my mother had spent decades creating. First, I reached out to everyone who had been affected by her fake communications, armed with screenshots and detailed explanations. I needed witnesses, and I needed their testimony to be rock solid. Dr. Martinez was shocked, but relieved when I explained what had happened. I have to tell you, I was genuinely concerned about the disconnect between our sessions and those emails, he admitted. In our meetings, you seemed anxious but stable, but those messages described someone who was genuinely dangerous to themselves and others. This explains the inconsistency completely. He agreed to provide written documentation of the fake emails, and his professional opinion that they were inconsistent with my actual mental state during our sessions. Sarah was furious, but more at my mother than at me. I knew something felt completely off about those messages, she said, scrolling through her phone. They did not sound like you at all. The vocabulary was wrong. The sentence structure was too formal. It was like someone was trying to imitate you but did not really know how you actually talk. My boss was actually grateful I brought it to his attention. We were about to require a psychiatric evaluation before allowing you back to work on sensitive projects, he admitted, showing me a file they had started on my concerning behavior. Haryar was involved, and we were considering whether you posed a safety risk to other employees. This changes everything. But I needed more than just testimonials. I needed to understand the full scope of what she had done. I hired a digital forensics expert, a guy I had met through work who specialized in cybercrime investigations. For $800, he did a complete analysis of my email account and found evidence that the infiltration went back almost 3 years. The forwarding rules were just the tip of the iceberg. She had been systematically intercepting my communications, reading my private conversations, and building profiles of my relationships so she could manipulate them more effectively. She knew exactly which friends to target with fake concerning messages because she had been monitoring who I talked to most frequently. The forensic analysis also revealed something that made my blood boil. She had been accessing my bank account statements through my email for over 2 years, tracking my spending patterns and savings growth. The financial projections folder on her computer was not just wishful thinking, it was based on detailed knowledge of my actual financial situation. She had been planning this takeover with the precision of a corporate hostile takeover. Armed with all this evidence and professional testimony, I decided to confront my mother directly. But I was not going in alone, and I was not going to give her any opportunity to spin the narrative in her favor. I invited my siblings for a family meeting at my mother's house, telling them I had discovered some important information about Mom's health and our family's financial future that they needed to know about. They drove in from Pennsylvania and Ohio, expecting to hear about medical bills or care arrangements for our aging mother. They had absolutely no idea they were about to witness the complete and total destruction of everything they thought they knew about the woman who had raised us. I arrived early and set up my laptop in her living room, connecting it to the TV she was so proud of. The 65-inch flat screen I had helped her buy last Christmas with my generous contribution to her struggling budget. When my brother Mike and sister Jessica arrived, Mom was already playing the role of concerned parent perfectly. "I'm so glad you are both here," she said to them, then turned to me with that familiar manipulative sweetness that I now recognized as pure performance. "I have been so worried about him lately. He seems different, more stressed than usual. I think the pressure at work might be getting to him, and his girlfriend has been acting strange around me." Even knowing what I knew, her performance was genuinely impressive. The worried mother, the caring tone, the subtle implication that I was struggling mentally and might be the reason for this family meeting. She was setting the stage for her narrative even now, positioning herself as the concerned party and me as the unstable one who might say unpredictable things. "Actually, Mom, you are absolutely right. I have been under a lot of stress lately," I said, moving to my laptop with deliberate calm. "And that is exactly what I wanted to talk to everyone about. See, I've been doing some research into the source of my recent anxiety and mental health concerns, and I discovered something really interesting." "Oh, honey, you do not need to worry everyone with your personal." "No, I think they should definitely hear this." I pulled up the first document on the TV screen, one of her fake diary entries describing my supposed breakdown, because it turns out my mental health issues are not quite what they seem to be. The room went completely silent as my siblings read the fabricated entry displayed on the screen in 40-inch clarity. "What is this?" Jessica asked, squinting at the screen. "These are documents I found on Mom's computer," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Fake diary entries, written in my voice, describing mental health symptoms and incidents that never actually happened. My mother's face went white, then red, then white again. I do not know what you are talking about." "Really?" I clicked to the next screen, showing the forged handwriting samples. "Because there is a lot more where that came from." For the next 20 minutes, I walked my family through the entire scope of my mother's deception. The fake emails, the intercepted communications, the forged documents, the research into having me committed. My brother and sister sat in stunned silence as the evidence mounted. My mother went through the classic stages: denial, anger, bargaining. "He's obviously having a breakdown," she tried. "He is paranoid, creating these elaborate conspiracy theories." "Mom," my sister interrupted, her voice cold. "We can see the timestamps. These documents are real." "You do not understand," my mother pleaded. "I was just trying to help him. He has been acting so strange I was worried." "You were worried," my brother said slowly. "So you decided to impersonate him and destroy his relationships?" "I was protecting him." "From what?" I asked. "From having a life you could not control?" The mask finally dropped. The concerned mother act disappeared, and what emerged was something cold and calculating. "You have no idea how hard it has been," she spat. "Watching you pull away, seeing you choose that girl over family, knowing you would eventually abandon me like your siblings did. I gave you everything, and you were just going to leave. So you decided to have me declared mentally incompetent and steal my money. It is not stealing if it is family money. I raised you, I sacrificed for you, and you owe me." My siblings exchanged looks of horror. "Jesus Christ, Mom," my sister whispered. "You were actually going to have him committed." "I was going to get him help. Real help, not whatever that quack therapist was doing." "You were going to have me locked up," I said quietly. "To steal my life. To keep me dependent on you forever." The room erupted. My siblings started yelling. My mother started crying her manipulative tears. But I felt nothing but relief. Finally, everyone could see what I'd been dealing with for years. What happened next was everything I had hoped for and more. My siblings immediately cut contact with my mother. They apologized to me for not seeing the manipulation sooner, for leaving me to deal with her alone for so many years. "We thought you were just the good son," my brother said. "We had no idea she was holding you prisoner." I pressed charges for identity theft, fraud, and computer crimes. The police were particularly interested in the forged documents and the planned psychiatric hold. While the legal process is still ongoing, my lawyer is confident we have a strong case. My mother tried to play the victim, of course. She called everyone she knew, claiming I was having a mental breakdown and turning the family against her. But I had already shared the evidence with key family members and friends. Her reputation as the long-suffering mother was permanently destroyed. The most satisfying part? Her attempt to isolate me completely backfired. Instead of driving people away, the truth brought them closer. My relationship with Sarah is stronger than ever. My siblings and I talk regularly now. Even extended family members have reached out to share their own stories of my mother's manipulation over the years. I also discovered I was not her first victim. She had attempted similar, smaller-scale deceptions with my siblings before they moved away. My brother admitted she had once impersonated him to break up with a girlfriend she did not approve of. My sister revealed that Mom had sabotaged several of her job interviews by calling employers with concerns about her reliability. We had all been living with her abuse, but I had been the unlucky one who stayed close enough for her to perfect her methods. The financial support stopped immediately, of course. I blocked her on all platforms, changed all my passwords, and set up new email accounts. I also invested in identity monitoring services and put fraud alerts on all my credit accounts. Dr. Martinez helped me work through the psychological impact of discovering that someone I trusted had been systematically gaslighting me for years. This is not just betrayal, he explained. This is a form of psychological abuse that can cause lasting trauma. He was right. For months, I questioned everything. Had other conversations been manipulated? Were other relationships affected? It took time to trust my own perception of reality again. But slowly, I rebuilt. My job performance improved dramatically once the fake mental health concerns were explained and resolved. Sarah and I moved in together. I reconnected with friends I had neglected while managing my mother's endless crises. Most importantly, I learned to recognize manipulation tactics. The guilt trips, the manufactured emergencies, the weaponization of family loyalty. I can spot them from a mile away now. Chapter 6. The Final Revelation. About 6 months after everything exploded, I got a call from my aunt, my mother's sister. She had heard about the situation through family gossip and wanted to share something that made everything even more disturbing. Your mother tried something similar with me about 15 years ago, she said. She convinced half the family I was having an affair and stealing money from our father's estate. It was all lies, but it nearly destroyed my marriage. Why did not you ever say anything? Who would have believed me? She was so convincing, so concerned, so loving. She would say things like, I hate to worry you, but I am concerned about Emmy's name, and then share these elaborate stories that sounded just plausible enough. It turned out my mother had a long history of manipulating family relationships for her own benefit. She would drive wedges between people, then position herself as the mediator and voice of reason. She had been doing it for decades. I realized I had been her masterpiece, the long-term project she had perfected over years of practice on others. But her plan had a fatal flaw. She underestimated my tech skills. If I had been in any other profession, if I had been less familiar with email systems and digital forensics, she might have succeeded. The thought still gives me chills. 2 years later, I am writing this from the home I now share with Sarah, who became my fiancée last month. We are planning a wedding that my mother will not be attending, and honestly, that feels perfect. My siblings and I have a group chat now where we share stories and support each other through the ongoing process of unpacking years of manipulation. We have all been in therapy, and we are all in much healthier places. My mother still tries to contact me occasionally through flying monkeys. Family members she has convinced to reach out on her behalf. The messages are always the same. She is sorry. She was just trying to help. She misses me. She has learned her lesson. I delete them without reading past the first line. The legal case resulted in a settlement that included financial restitution and a permanent restraining order. She is also required to complete court-mandated therapy, though I doubt she is taking it seriously. Sometimes people ask if I feel guilty about cutting her off so completely. The answer is no. What she did was not a mistake or a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a systematic, premeditated attempt to destroy my life for her own benefit. She did not just try to steal my money. She tried to steal my sanity, my relationships, my freedom, and my future. That is not something you forgive. That is something you survive. If you are reading this and something feels familiar, trust your instincts. Document everything. Protect your digital accounts. And remember, family is not about blood. It is about love, respect, and mutual support. Real love does not involve forged documents and fake mental health crises. Real love does not try to have you committed to steal your money. And real love definitely does not spend years building a case for why you are too crazy to live your own life. My mother taught me what love is not. And in a twisted way, that might be the most valuable lesson she ever gave me. I chose myself. I chose truth. I chose freedom. And I have never been happier.